So I actually just finished recording my SMT 5 Vengeance review a few minutes ago, but I figured that I would also address another thing I wanted to talk about that I've been watching recently. It's a new anime. It's the Code Geass spin-off and sequel because it's both Roze or Roze of the Recapture. Um, Now, look, I'm gonna lay it out here. I don't think this show is good. I think it's pretty bad, actually. But what surprises me is that this is not like just the take, right? I thought everyone would kind of be in consensus about the show not being very good. Apparently, this is a controversial topic. Apparently, some people like this show and are defending the show, and even more surprisingly, some people are bad mouthing Lelouch of the Resurrection while also defending the show. Now, look, if you don't like Resurrection, that's fine, and if you like Rose, I have a hard time understanding either of those things, but sure, that's fine too. But to do both seems to be like the most inconsistent logical fallacy I've ever fucking seen. Um, because as of episode 9 of the English release and of the English dubs, this show is not very good. And I think episode 9 has made it worse than it already was. And while it still has 3 episodes and certainly something incredible could happen because that's kind of what happened with R2. I suspect that it won't. But I'm going to be proven wrong on this. But my problem is that this show is very clearly just trying to be a very cheap imitation of the original series. And it's not trying to do anything differently at all, really. Um, and it's only in this latest episode that it has done something different or had started to, and I don't like that thing different that it did because I don't agree with it. So to take this all the way back to the beginning, I'm a huge fan of Code Geass. I love the original series. It's my favorite thing, and Lelouch is my favorite character. Um, and I love the whole cast of Code Geass. I think it's just an amazing show that works in every way. It's got some flaws. It's not perfect, but it's incredible overall. And I just don't think Rose is hitting any of the necessary beats. It seems to be that the show is being made by people who had at best a surface level understanding of why the original series works, and at worst no understanding at all. Um, so I went in being very optimistic, open-minded, and positive. So I didn't go into this expecting to dislike it. I've just developed a dislike of it over the course of watching it. When I was watching the first episode, my immediate thoughts were, this is very similar to the original series. Like, this is almost beat for beat in some ways the same. They're trying to do the same opening. And I recognized that, and I was like, that's not necessarily a good sign. But I was willing to see where it went because clearly there are some different factors here, and maybe they'll go somewhere interesting. And when it was revealed that Ash is under Rose's influence of the Geass, I thought that was interesting. And when Rose is revealed to actually be Sakuya Sumeragi, I thought that totally didn't expect that. That hit me out of nowhere. I thought that was super interesting. And when she used her Geass for the first time on screen, which they'd been building up to the whole time, um, and instead of just telling this guy what to do, she gave him like a devil's deal, which Lelouch never did. He never used this ability. And so I thought in that moment her Geass was different. Like, she can't just tell someone what to do. There has to be a condition behind it. Like, every time she uses her Geass, it's gonna be like this. And all the previous times that she used it, it was like that. But so far, as of episode 9, she has never used it that way again. So I don't even know how that's possible. Like, could Lelouch have done that? Why isn't she doing that more? I don't know. But it's weird to introduce that new, unique element and then throw it out. And her Geass is basically identical to Lelouch's, except that it's audio versus visual, eye contact. That's the only difference. But functionally, it's exactly the same. Um, and unfortunately, while it would have been really interesting for her and Ash to clash over him being under her Geass, which is what happened in the original series, if people accused Lelouch of doing exactly this, even though he never did for his allies, that would have been really interesting to see play out. But again, so far as of episode 9, they're not delivering on that appropriately because um, it turns out Ash actually knew Sakuya's father rather than killed him. He knew him, and actually her father saved his life, and so now he was planning to protect her anyway. So even though he's a little pissed off that he was under her Geass, ultimately he's kind of okay with it because he was gonna protect her anyway, and he's resolving to continue to protect her and now to give her a fair shake. So basically, the fact that he was under her control the whole time was pointless. Like it meant nothing. It like what does it amount to, right? Maybe at the end of the show, he'll make good on that promise that she made him that like when we're done, you can shoot me. Maybe he'll do that, and that would be interesting, right? I suspect that he won't though. So there are things that this show set up to do differently that so far it just hasn't executed well on. Those were two of its unique ideas that have not gone anywhere. Instead, it's been insistent on trying to replicate everything about the original show, including the characters. So they have a number of characters who are meant to parallel existing characters, but the one that I want to focus on is the new Ace pilot. And I actually have a website behind the voice actors open right now to look at the cast. Because if I didn't do this, I actually would not know what anybody's name is other than Roze, Sakuya, and Ash. I wouldn't know anybody's name and Norland because they're such nobody, nothing characters. None of them have left any impression on me. And if they have left an impression, it's been a bad one. So this Haruka girl with the purple hair, the ace pilot of the 7 Shining Stars, I don't know anything about her. I don't get her as a character. I don't like her. I don't even think that she's necessarily a good pilot. I think she got her mech. She fought one time and she lost. I don't think that she's made a good impression. And the whole ace status, the fact that they referred to her as the ace ahead of time, and they said, well, she did well in the simulations, and her mech's been holding her back. That's why she hasn't been impressive so far. All of that seemed really shitty to me. It's like she's failed to make any impression in terms of being a unique and inspiring character in the way that Colin made a unique impression in her first various appearances throughout the series before she got called the ace, before she got the Gurren, and then when she did get the Gurren, she had a whole fucking episode dedicated to her blowing shit away with the Gurren, right? We don't get that here. And part of the problem with this show, I think, is that they seem to be trying to write a 25-episode series in 12 episodes. And I think that's not good. That's terrible. Now, some of the defenders of this show have said, well, there's certain financial realities that are here at play, like the movie underperformed, or the current anime industry isn't going to support a 25-episode series. But I don't think any of these factors matter. Like, you can consider them as outside factors, but if I'm judging the art that is presented to me, the product that is presented to me, the anime that as it is presented, it's not good. They don't have time to do what they did with Colin and dedicate episodes to building her up as an interesting character, with like deep motivations and a personality. Like I just don't know anything about this character other than that she has purple hair and that we see her ass a lot when she's in her nightmare frame. I don't know anything about her, and she has not done anything impressive to like awe me or make me side with her. Partially because Ash has been here the whole time and he's just the best pilot, which is also kind of a problem, that Ash is just so good that he's basically unstoppable and he's been around from the beginning. So I mean, he's kind of stealing her spotlight as the supposed ace pilot, right? But a lot of these other characters who are part of the Shining Stars are really just nothing characters who have done nothing, as opposed to Ogi and Tamaki, who consistently like stood out and were interesting characters to watch, even if ultimately my opinion on Ogi is that he's a shithead and he's the worst character in the series. But like, at least they were interesting characters. I don't know anything about Isao, Tomomi Oda, or Shota Munamori. I don't know anything about these characters. I don't know anything about Yuri Sano. But I gotta tell you, I know one thing about Yoko Araki, the blonde chick. She's got big tits and she likes to show them off. And this is another problem I have with the show. Now, to be clear, I'm a guy. I'm a straight guy. I like girls and I like fan service, okay? So the original series, when Colin, who's an awesome character that I like, um, is sometimes her ass is in the frame, or occasionally she's in like a bunny outfit because of weird circumstances, right? I appreciate all that. I'm down for some fan service, okay? But you have to know and like the character, and the fan service has to be done appropriately at the right time, or at least in fucking moderation. But this character, along with her counterpart on the Britannian side, Catherine Sabathra, uh, are horrible characters. Because the only thing I know about either of them, really, the first thing I knew about either of them is that they're girls with big tits that like to show them off. Um, Now, look, Colin had big tits, but she didn't ever dress to show them off specifically, other than the bunny suit in R2, but that was part of an infiltration mission. Like, she wouldn't have chosen to wear that any other time. And she's not going into military operations with her bits out, you know? She's dressed in the same kind of outfit everybody else is in the Black Knights, either in that the actual Black Knight uniform or eventually in like her Gurren suit. And you can criticize that it's skin tight or whatever, but the guys wear the same fucking suit. Everybody wears these same kind of suits. The first time you see Suzaku suit up, it's an ass shot, okay? Everybody wears these same suits. The fact that the camera happens to focus on her, that's not saying anything about her character or her as a person. That's just the camera. You know, that's not in her control. But these characters wake up every day and choose to dress in these ridiculous ways despite the situation that they're in. And I'm actually not sure which outfit I like less and which character I hate more. Because on one hand, like, Yoko's outfit is something like, there are women that exist with tits like Yoko, and there are women who exist that dress like Yoko. I live near a college town. I could drive to that college town, go to the mall in that college town, and I would see women dressed like Yoko. All right, if not more scantily clad. That's not the problem. The problem is that she's in these fucking military operations, and on screen, I'm gonna edit in the exact scene that pissed me off the most recently, where she's standing next to the military commander of the Seven Shining Stars, whose name I'm looking for right now, but he's like further down on this page. It's going to take me a minute to find this guy. I'm not sure where he is. Kensai Kuroda. She's standing next to this guy, the actual military commander of the group, and they're like talking about the battle that's happening, or they're talking about how their forces are getting wiped out. And the whole time, like, her tits are in frame. It's completely ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. And Catherine's outfit just doesn't make any even fucking sense. Like, what is even going on? Somehow she's got side and under boob and cleavage all going on at the same time. Like, I like, she might as well not even be wearing a shirt. I just don't. How does that outfit work? Who designed it? Who thought it was a good idea? Like, does she want? Like, it's so silly. And look, I actually like that her mech is super silly. That's kind of endearing in a way. But her outfit is just particularly ridiculous. Like, if it was just one or the other, or if her outfit was just a little bit less stupid, I'd be fine with it. It doesn't help that she seems like a shitty person and a shitty character. Now, maybe she's going to go through some character development in these next couple episodes. They seem to be suggesting that. But, like, we're 9 episodes into a 12-episode series, and she's just now getting the suggestion that she might have some character development. That's not good. Now, we come back to that fact that there's not enough episodes in the show. So just like the way they've done the fan service in the show is no good. It's terrible. And to be honest, the other scene where Sakura is confronted by that Britannian knight who's actually on her side, Walther, that was also kind of in this category where it's like, dude, you really couldn't have picked up you couldn't have picked a better time to do this, you know? Like, it's just weird that they did that, you know? It all seems very forced. So I don't appreciate these characters. And the rest of the cast are nothing burgers, who I know nothing about. Now, as far as the Britannians go, they're all shitheads. Like, they're all just evil, comically evil for the sake of being evil. And that's not really what the series was ever about. Like, sure, there were some low-level generals that Lelouch stomped on because you need somebody to stomp on. But the actual main characters, the Knights of the Round themselves, were mostly complex characters, and the ones who weren't were side characters, like that vampire character. He existed so Colin could shit on him, right? And that was cool. And to be honest, he was sort of a unique character. He wasn't even around that long. But these characters are all just so comically evil. And the absolute worst example is Norland himself. Norland is a complete fucking psychopath. Like, I have no idea what this guy's motivation is. Again, we're 9 episodes into a 12-episode series. I know nothing about this guy other than that he was supposedly a knight of the round. I don't know which knight he was supposed to be, and I don't know where the fuck he was during the whole Zero Rebellion. But he's a complete insane psychopath, and I assume his motivations are going to be even wilder than we've seen before. At least the other characters had some compelling motivations. Like, Charles and Schnizel's worldviews were fucked up and twisted, but like, ultimately they were both doing what they thought was best for the world. I don't think Norland's gonna have that. I think Norland's just an evil, psychotic motherfucker. And the reason I'm so convinced of this now is episode 9, because the thing that episode 9 did that I do not like is they introduced these new type of mech. I don't think they're a nightmare because I think they're a drone. I don't think there's anyone piloting these things. They seem to be drones that are just designed to like suck people up into a grinder and turn them into red mist. It's absolutely horrific. And like, so when they were introduced, it was such a whiplash of like a tonal shift that I was shook for like a day. Um, and I'm not a squeamish person. Like, I play very violent video games. I watch very violent media. I am no stranger to violence, and I've seen some violence in real life as well. I'm no stranger to violence, and even very similar types of violence. But when it's done in a show like this that has generally never had this kind of thing, it's a super tonal whiplash that I was just not prepared for at all, and it was horrifying. These things are the creations of psychopaths. Like, it's obviously they've always had violence in the series, and the Britannians have always mercilessly gunned down people, but like, gunning down some civilians and that imagery is horrific in a way, but it's way more tame than sucking people up into these things designed to turn them into red mist. Like, it's actually psychotic. It's completely batshit that he came up with these and deployed these things. And I'm not even talking about how he managed to deploy them all over the world. That's a whole other thing. But just the idea that he came up with them and the fact that they exist in this series, they shouldn't exist in this world. It doesn't make any sense. They've never existed before, and I think it opens a really weird door. Like, what's next? Are they going to have fucking death rollers? Like from Mega Man 7? Are they going to have death wheels from Warhammer? Are they going to have fucking crop dusters? Like, what's next with these maniacal evil inventions? Like, it's wild. Um, I did not appreciate it, and especially because it came at a weird time, right between some very lighthearted scenes. Again, super disarming, and sure, it was shocking. Like, there was definitely some shock value there. But I've never watched Code Geass for fucking shock value. But that's what this was. And the problem now they've put themselves in the corner of is either these things are going to be really effective and they're going to do some horrible shit. I mean, they already have, but they're going to devastate these populations. Or because they introduced like the Akito cast and these casts from the manga, and because Zero's around, um, or they're going to be completely irrelevant. They're not going to do anything because Zero, Suzaku's going to jump into Lancelot, Akiko's going to jump in as Alexander or whatever, and they're just going to slaughter these things because I can't see how these things would actually fight a nightmare. They seem like they'd get shit stomped by a nightmare. They're just here to devastate the population. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the plan. Maybe it's a distraction. But it's just so out of nowhere tonally that I dislike it greatly. These things do not belong in Code Geass. Like, this kind of shit does not belong in this series. Code Geass has always had the very carefully balanced tone of like actual terrorism and war crimes over here or 1 minute, and like high school shenanigans the next minute. But that was a very careful balance that the original series walked, and it was very important because it humanized Lelouch and it gave weight to everything happening around him, and it usually did advance the plot in some way. But there's a difference between just like general terrorism and war crimes and these maniacal psychopathic inventions. Even like the Flea that existed. I mean, like sure, the nuke atomizes people, and so that's similar in a way. And maybe you could argue even worse, although personally I don't. Um, But you never saw that personally. Like, you never saw someone get atomized by a fucking Flea. It was just always like the numbers. You're presented with the numbers of casualties and you see the devastation of the area, but you never see people actually subject to it, because that's a whole different thing. But these things, if you, I mean, nukes exist in our real life and they are horrific, but like, if these things showed up in real life, that's the most horrific thing in the world. And it reminded me of a movie recently too that was also kind of horrific in the same way, and that was a fucking horror movie. These things are directly out of a fucking horror movie. Why are they in my code, Geass? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know why they're here, and I don't know what Norland's plan is, and I don't know how they're gonna justify this guy as a character, because he's just transparently evil for evil's sake. There's nothing he can do at this point to make him a complex or interesting character. He's just a prick. And kind of on that note, Neo Britannia itself and this situation in Hokkaido with this barrier that surrounds the province, it feels very cheap. On one hand, I appreciate that there probably would be these group of Britannians who are not willing to just submit to the new rule of things and the new way of things. So I acknowledge that people like Norland and these other characters probably would exist, but I object to them being able to successfully take over this province of Japan like they have and hold it for as long as they have, because it's been at least like 4 or 5 years. And then to not only hold it, but then to somehow force the Black Knights and the UN to a negotiation table where they're trying to argue for like statehood. And the Black Knights are even entertaining this notion, and Cornelia is like, well, they have us beat because, you know, sometimes there was racism against Britannia. That's fucking psychotic. That's absolutely insane. This is a terrorist organization who is out here slaughtering innocents just because they can. That's like the first thing we see is these two redheaded brothers just killing innocent Japanese people because they can, because they're evil. And so even if Catherine and this other character, this other redheaded woman, Nara, even if they're not completely evil people themselves, they're on board with this. They've joined this organization. And I think it's an important distinction to draw that in the original series, characters like Valletta and all of the other characters who were born into Britannia had only ever known Britannian rule. And so it's very much a situation where they were grown up, fed Britannian propaganda, and they just kind of established a way of life. I don't think that they were all inherently bad people, although they certainly did bad things, especially Cornelia. But they never actively made the choice to be evil. They were kind of born into this situation, especially the nobles like Cornelia. She had expectations on her. And maybe she also, as I've heard some people theorize, that maybe a lot of her hate toward the Japanese was because she thought the Japanese had killed Lelouch and Nunnally. Even though that was ultimately Charles's and Marianne's fault. But, you know, maybe that's interesting. And so that's why she kind of chilled out a little bit in R2. But a lot of these people, when they were presented with a different worldview, when things started to shift in their world, they all made a choice to back away from Britannia, eventually in some way. Or they were exposed to a different point of view that shows that these were interesting people, these were complex people who can change despite what they've done. I don't get that here. And even if, I mean, the problem is that these people live in a post-Zero Requiem world. So, like, they may have also been born in Britannia, but then they experienced the Zero Rebellion like everybody else did. And then the world was freed, and they should have been able to see, oh yeah, we were fucked up, we were wrong. But they made the choice actively again to be evil. And they're so comically evil. It's not like, you know, they're just a little bit evil. Like, Nara is clearly not super happy about everything that she's doing, but the rest of the cast is not like Nara. Most of these guys are like Norland, especially the scientist Kristoff. Like, they're all just so transparently, cartoonishly evil. And there's no justification for it. There's no way for them to be interesting or complex characters. They're just boring, literal villains of the episode, because most of them get off in the same episode they show up or whatever. It's the cast is so boring and uninteresting, and the Black Knights, based on what I said earlier, are proving once again that they're just completely incompetent. I mean, they get more incompetent every time we see them. Without Lelouch to guide their every step, the Black Knights can do nothing. They were unable to stop or prevent the invasion and take over Hokkaido. In 5 years, they haven't been able to break it, and now they're at the negotiation table with these fucking psychopaths. It's absolutely insane, and I don't understand why they even had to recycle this plot. Why did this have to be the plot? Why couldn't the plot be the attempted takeover of Hokkaido. Why couldn't the plot be Norland and this group are rising up, they're rebelling, and they're trying to take Hokkaido, and the fight is to protect Hokkaido? At least then there's less ass pull involved. You don't have to come up with this shield. You don't have to justify why the Black Knights can't do anything. And you could have like an interesting plot that isn't a complete rehash of the original series. It could actually be an inversion of the original series, especially if we followed Norland or any of these Britannians, and maybe they had a Geass. And so we're literally watching them do the same shit that Lelouch did, but they're trying to do it, on the other side, on the reverse side, right? That would have been a way more interesting premise than, hey, we're going to do the original series again, but worse, and only in 12 episodes, but we're going to pretend that it's 25 episodes. It's completely insane. Like, these characters are all so pointless. And this barrier, too. So I saw Nina's on this page. How does this barrier work? Because how is it that they were able to sneak Nina and a bunch of nightmares and supplies into Hokkaido to help the Seven Shining Stars fight? But they can't sneak. If they can sneak nightmare frames in, why can't Colin and Suzaku board their nightmares and sneak in? And then just shit stomp everybody, right? It doesn't make any sense. But the series has to justify why those characters can't just show up and roll everybody. And that is a difficult question to answer, but like Resurrection answered it by saying the enemy is just that powerful. They have a Geass and they have hacks, right? They cheat. Like that was pretty good answer. How do you beat people who have already won the war? How do you stop Lelouch and all these unstoppable characters? Well, you introduce a character who cheats, right? They just don't play by the rules. That's a pretty good answer. But this show kind of had to come up with a different answer, and I think that this is a really shitty, stupid answer. I don't think it's very good. And even Sakuya and Ash themselves, who are the most interesting characters, the only characters of interest, really, aren't that interesting. Ash is actually sort of becoming more of the main character now because Sakuya is doing so little. It's weird because Sakuya's whole motivation seems to be rescuing her friend Sakura. She doesn't really seem to give a damn about anything else. Like, her plan very much seems to be rescue Sakura, dip. She's not invested in actually trying to help stop Britannia or take back Hokkaido at all. Maybe now she is. Maybe that was her revelation at the end of episode 9 as she realizes that she's been selfish. We'll have to see how that plays out. But that's been her whole thing the whole time, is I just want to rescue my friend. And there's no real complexity to her. Like, there's no darkness in her like there was in the Lelouch. She's not conflicted or pulled in any different directions because she doesn't really have a lot of friends. I mean, she has some people at this fucking maid cafe. But what she's doing doesn't pull her away from those people like it did Lelouch. That she's got nothing interesting going on. And even her theatrics feel so forced and artificial. Like, Lelouch's felt like a natural extension of his arrogance. And he gets called out on it, which is kind of funny sometimes. But Sakuya does these elaborate, exaggerated things for seemingly no reason. Like, why does she have this flair for the dramatic? Where does that come from? Because she doesn't seem to be full of herself in the same way that Lelouch does. What's her motivation for doing it? Like, what does she think of herself? Like, is she this genius strategist? I mean, she seems capable enough, but there's just nothing about her that I really understand or that stands out to me in any particular way, other than that she wants to rescue her friend and that she's not as competent as she thought she was or as previous protagonists have been. And again, maybe that's her arc now. 9 episodes in, she's realized this weakness and she's going to work on it. But even then, I don't know what she's going to do in the future other than suddenly be competent, but that's not going to by itself make her interesting. There's just nothing going on there. And she has no personal ties to any of this other than her friend. And by the way, her friend may be in technical captivity, but like, she's living pretty good in Britannian custody because like, she's basically being installed as like a regent or a public figure. She seems to have some measure of actual political power. Like, for some reason, Norland's just letting her do this. I have no idea why. She now has her own personal bodyguard to protect her from any harm that could possibly come to her. And the scientist who threatened Sakuya and said, hey, maybe I need to bring in someone personal to you so that you actually have a reason to do what I say, and I could put you in an interesting situation that would challenge your morals. Nothing comes of that because Sakura's never involved. She's totally fine the whole time. So it's not like Sakura's in any kind of fucking imminent danger. Like, she's totally fine. I don't even understand the threat. Like, what's the point of her being in this position? What are they planning to do with her? I mean, sure, they might eventually kill her, but why? Why did they install her at all? It seems like they need her for some reason, or she looks good. So, like, as far as anyone can tell, she's pretty safe. She doesn't really need rescuing, right? Meanwhile, Ash actually has a deep personal reason to want this Norland guy dead. And that's way more interesting, especially because Norland's just such a fucking psycho that you want him to die. You want to see him lose. Um, but that's kind of all Ash has too. He has some other stuff, like he has a lot of personality in terms of like his connection with Raspberry and how he handles people like on the streets and stuff. But in terms of motivation, that's all they have. They basically took Lelouch's motivation of protecting Nonnelly and get revenge on Charles and destroy Britannia. And they kind of split out the first two and got rid of that third one. Like, no one's all that interested in reclaiming Britannia specifically. They left that to all the other characters. But again, all the other characters are nothing burgers, right? So none of this just makes any fucking sense to me. And it's just super disappointing. Uh, I I don't see how they can turn this around in 3 episodes. I don't see what they could do to make up for some of these shortcomings. And if this is the quality that we're going to expect moving forward, I'm not here for it, because this is not interesting. These characters are not compelling. They don't stand out. 12 episodes is not enough time to tell the kind of plots that Code Geass needs. And if they can't get 25 episodes, then they need to write tighter plots, right? You need to cut half of these characters. Half of these characters are fucking pointless. And focus more on a handful of characters who do matter. Like, cut out half of these Seven Shining Stars, cut out half of these Britannians, and just focus on the handful of characters that are interesting, that have some personality, some depth to them, and then you might have a good 12-episode show. But that's not what they did. And I don't really get it. And so again, it's baffling to me that people are like, Resurrection bad, Roze good. How? In what way? Even the action set pieces. I mean, sure, the fights themselves, the mechs are very well animated, but the fights themselves are nothing special. There's never any kind of stakes to anything. I'm not excited to see anybody do anything, because again, I don't know any of these characters other than Ash, and I know Ash is going to win. He's just guaranteed to win. The only person who was ever guaranteed to win in Code Geass was fucking Suzaku whenever his ass showed up, and he was the antagonist, right? That was why that worked, is that when he showed up, you knew Lelouch's plan was about to go to shit. But now that Saku and Ash are on the same side the whole time, it means that there's never really any stakes to these fights. And even when they were both absent, really, and they get invaded by the Britannians, everybody important makes it out. Or at least, a lot of the characters make it out. A lot of these guys died. But I didn't care. I mean, was I supposed to care about any? I didn't even know who we lost. I couldn't tell you right now who died and who didn't, other than Haruka and Yoko. I think they did make it out, because of course they did, and the general, obviously. But other than that, I assume these other guys that I don't recognize died. That's why I assume I don't recognize them. So it was all completely pointless, and it's come of nothing. Where did they get the Damocles from? There was only one Damocles, and they sent it into the sun. Where did this one come from? They built another one. How does Neo Britannia have these kind of resources? They've occupied Hokkaido for 5 years. Where are they getting these resources? Who is funding them? Where are they getting money from? Because the whole world is united against Britannia. Who is funding them? Where do they get the money to build a fucking Damocles, to make more Flayas, or to acquire the existing Flayas? What was their goal with those Flayas anyway? What were they planning to destroy? It's their territory. What were they planning to destroy? I don't get it. And how the fuck do they build these killer robots to invade the entire world at the same time? I do not know what's going on in this show. So I'm at this point I'm 9 episodes in. I'll watch the rest of the show, but I'm not happy about it. To be completely honest with you, I am not a fan of what is going on with this show right now. I think this is really bad, and I'm kind of sick of seeing people defend it and say, oh, well, Sunrise, X, Y, or Z outside factors. I don't care. The product is bad. The art is bad. The show is bad. The characters are bad. There's really very little good here to speak of. And what good there was, what potential there was, they have so seemingly squandered. Now, again, maybe the next 3 episodes, but to be honest, even if the next 3 episodes are good, it's not going to retroactively make everything before it better. This is not going to work out that way. So, just wanted to get my thoughts out. Very disappointed in the show. Very upset with how this is playing out and people's reactions to it. Very upsetting, but that's been another hot take from guy with all the hot takes. I look forward to more hot takes in the near future.